Wow. Well, I'd say that this was a fun episode of the series in probably the strangest way possible. Instead of furthering the story or resolving any subplots, it seems to focus on one single element that's been on people's minds for a while. But the way that it's put together is actually done well enough that I'm willing to accept its fillerish tone. But what exactly makes it so good? Well, let's take a look. A mysterious figure is floating around in space before it's knocked into the Earth's atmosphere by some asteroids. The scene takes its time pacing this out with a looming tone as well as a sense of mystery. The nebula's color choices give it a gentle touch, with the overall foreshadowing being done with a good subtlety. You kind of wonder what exactly this will have to do in the episode, as it effectively piques your curiosity. After that, we see that Ashi and Jack are at the local market, and it's nice to see that she's still an innocent, wide-eyed curious. What I like about it in this instance is that she's not seeing it in a dystopian state, nor is she being occupied by an important search or task. She's getting a chance to explore more of her surroundings without feeling distracted by anything, which makes her more in tune with her environment. We then go to a brief moment with Jack trying out some fish that oddly enough turns his own head into a fish. When Ashi refuses to try any, the keeper of the stand tells Jack that women can be so typical, and he agrees with a confused expression. This was a pretty humorous moment given how well the delivery is presented. Its randomness mixed with the nervous reaction from Ashi and the confused banter between Jack and the walrus, as well as this funny still image, make for a nice laugh. The two catch a ride on top of a giant camel where Jack's head just goes back to normal for no reason, and they find themselves surrounded by some green tiger people. The two find themselves forced to stand together due to how crowded it is, and then we get those typical awkward moments where the couple are trying to work around their crush on each other, which is a little too pushy in its delivery. I mean, they literally started off with a "something is poking me" innuendo. Even the music that plays is so bizarre with this weird bada 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 chant, and it really sticks out too much. This moment feels very distracting as it takes away from the subtlety that the episode was going for earlier. And even then, this scene is very unsubtle on its own with its incredibly obvious dialogue and shots. And it kind of just holds on to the moment with that weird music continuously playing in the background. I guess they're trying to be subtle about it by focusing visually on the romance between the two, but there's plenty of other ways it could have been done better. Then Jack begins to notice some unnerving stuff regarding the tiger people. How their clothes spell out ominous messages when standing together, which is a pretty atmospheric moment as it builds up the danger that the two are currently in. It also feels very well timed considering how off guard you find yourself when you see more of the messages that their clothes spell out, which is made more effective with the contrast towards the previous moment. However, that makes the last scene even more awkward. Like, were those tiger people really just standing there while Jack and Ashi were in their shy bit of romance? You kind of wonder what must have been going on in their heads while listening to it. But then the action begins as the two start fighting off the tiger soldiers in one of the better scenes of the episode. Unlike the previous moment that felt really awkward and unsubtle, this one takes advantage of all its elements, making for a great mix of action and humor. The fighting itself is simplified and it doesn't get too intense or violent, which actually matches better with the current tone that the story has established. It has good speed and some fun ways the two cover each other while transitioning between their fights. And it also uses that awkwardness between the two for an effective shot of the two nervously apologizing while one of the tigers just stands there with a beaten up expression. Just seeing the two nervously speaking after just punching a guy in the face and seeing him just standing there is actually really hilarious. And it ends with the two exclaiming that they should probably leave in a straightforward and stuttered expression. The two manage to escape and land on the ground where they notice that Ashi is still holding on to Jack after they got out of there. She lets go, but without either of them letting out a chuckle or a spoken word, simply expressing a small smile which makes it more humorous and charming. The next few minutes is the two roaming through the desert with some excellent instrumental music playing in the background. It has a consistent rhythm and a cultural melody along with some well-mixed variety which blends very well with the designs of the backgrounds. There's also a great moment where Jack makes a straw hat for himself and Ashi that admits a nostalgic feel to it, memorizing how Jack made his hats in the past as well as being a nice callback to the original series. And if you remember exactly how Jack learned to make his hats, this scene has even more meaning to it. And the blooming romance between the two is done much more subtly here. The entire scene is done with no dialogue, and it doesn't hold too long on any of the shots that it uses to add on the effect that it goes for. They're very well put together shots of the two being happy together and expressing a noticeable interest in each other. Their facial expressions are all that's needed for this scene, and they have a warm, welcoming vibe to them. Eventually, the two find themselves in a sandstorm and seek shelter in a mysterious structure. What they don't know is that this mysterious figure is the same one that just fell onto the earth. The atmosphere in this place is really interesting, having a nice variety to it and some good color choices that differ from each other. It's also very wide, having a real size to it where the inside of the structure looks like it matches with the outside of it. Suddenly, Ashi is bit by a poisonous leech, and Jack kills it and sucks out the poison from Ashi's leg. It's another nice off-guard moment that builds up steadily to an even greater looming threat. The two start running further into the fortress, and they find themselves getting lost, going from room to room trying to find their way out. I really like the way these rooms are shot. Not only do the angles have a nice variety to them, but the scope and the size of each area gives them a sense of intimidation, which is more effective when combined with the insect creature chasing them. The music also does a nice job of building up the tension, having a deep tone with a fast pace that becomes more intense as the looming threat catches up to them. They eventually find themselves in a weapons vault where they learn more about this alien lifeform and obtain a device specifically meant for killing it. The only problem is that neither of them know exactly how it works. So they refresh their inventory and equip themselves with the backup weaponry they found and proceed to lure the creature out into a trap. As it attacks, the two try to get the device to work while defending themselves, but unfortunately to no avail. When Ashi is caught off guard, the creature's leeches proceed to eat Ashi's clothing, and Jack is embarrassed to see her naked. This reaction had me dying of laughter. From his horrified face to the way he stutters on his words to Ashi shrugging it off, to Jack covering her with his gi and hiding his timid behavior, it's all delivered with such a precise level of timing and surprise that it just got to me so hard. The two then find themselves surrounded as Jack takes one more shot at the device. Jack manages to activate it and kills the creature just as it's consuming them, with the two questionably recovering from the attack. And, I shit you not, they straight up kiss. Yeah, like out of nowhere. There's no lead into it, no implication, no steady build-up. It literally cuts to them kissing. I could not have made this up on my own, and it's somehow the funniest way for this episode to end. Not to mention that they literally play Dean Martin's Everybody Loves Somebody during this scene. And it continues throughout the credits. This is probably the weirdest episode I've ever seen, and strangely enough, I really admire the episode for that. Now, at this point you've probably noticed that this review feels much shorter compared to others, and the reason for that is because this episode doesn't really have all that much to analyze. The whole episode is mostly asphyxiated with the developing romance between Jack and Ashi to the point that there's not much room to talk about anything else. But it would be wrong of me to not do so, so I guess I should go over more things that I'd like to say about the episode. This one is really different from all the other ones in Season 5 so far, as it seems to go for a much more lighthearted approach. It also manages to have a good range of pace and tone, having a more upbeat nature mixed with some suspense and tension. The episode has a lot of fun ways of juggling the romance between Jack and Ashi, the fight sequences, the silent moments, and the atmosphere of the prison. The action is very well mixed with an adorable sense of humor, even if there were times that it came across as too obvious. The episode's sense of humor is mostly hit and miss. Like, there are times that the banter between the two feels really awkwardly presented, but when they get it right, they really get it right. When something makes you laugh in this episode, it makes you laugh hard. It has good build-up, and the story itself does a great job of going through all these elements while still maintaining a good focus on Jack and Ashi's connection. Of course, this means I have to talk about the inevitable topic, the shipping drama. A lot of people were preferring that their relationship was that of a father-daughter or a student-mentor connection instead of the more obvious romantic relationship. Firstly, I didn't really believe in the father-daughter relationship, considering that they're basically the same age. But I did support the idea of them being a student and teacher. Ashi is mainly a curious person who's earnestly learning about the world around her, with Jack as her guide and moral compass. She certainly learned a lot from traveling with him, so it figured that she would be like a student of his, which would further develop Jack's background with all that he's learned growing up and in his travels. However, I can't say that I'm annoyed by this choice to make them a couple because I already figure out long beforehand that they were most likely going to do this. In several ways, it does make sense for them to be a couple considering the trust and support that they have for each other. But other times it just feels really weird. The way Ashi speaks with Jack during certain points makes her feel somewhat oblivious. And there's also the idea that Jack is mentally way older than she is. Though I am willing to let that slide because there were several times in the episode where their connection was handled well. The moments without any dialogue that downplayed any awkward banter were done nicely, as it simply allowed the episode to express the romance instead of blathering it out. I mentioned earlier that this is somewhat of a filler episode considering that it just focuses on Jack and Ashi's relationship, while not really covering anything else that's going on. I say this because there's only 2 episodes left and there's still a couple of things that need to be wrapped up. Next week's episode will most likely cover the Guardian and Jack returning to his own time, but that still leaves the Scotsman's army, possibly Scaramouche, and now we have Ashi seemingly being separated from Jack, which is probably going to be another side story if the episode goes that route. At this point, I feel like my hopes of an epic war montage between Aku and all of Jack's allies are all but dashed. At this point in the season, there's just not enough time left over to build that up properly. Not to mention how Jack and the Scotsmen were apparently meant to meet up again after all this time, but it doesn't seem to be going in that direction. I really do wish that the romance between Jack and Ashi was executed more subtly so that the episode could have fit in more subplots, while scrapping out that whole stuck in an alien prison and replacing it with them running into the Scotsman's army. Because at this point in the season, it's too late for the Scotsman's presence to have any real influence, especially if Jack is just gonna go back to his own time anyway. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't like this episode because it was still good. It's paced well, it mixed action, comedy, and romance in a very balanced manner, it has good music, good atmosphere, and inserting Dean Martin into the show's soundtrack is quite possibly the best thing this show has ever done. Thanks again for watching my Samurai Jack reviews. Feel free to subscribe for future content and be sure to have a great day. MisAnthro Pony, over and out.
Everybody loves somebody sometime. Everybody falls in love somehow.